Hey everyone, welcome back. I got well, hopefully a useful video for you today. That is what is left of the Hillbilly Riggin vacuum lines that I'd put on my pickup back in November of 21. And we're in mid-August of 21, or 22, gosh. We didn't go backwards. But we're coming around about a year since I did that, and this stuff was starting to show its age. I didn't expect it to last very long. It lasted about as long as it needed to. I procrastinated enough about looking and getting the parts and fixing it properly because that was always my intention, to go back in with better components and fix all the little vacuum lines so that I didn't have to worry about them coming apart and getting brittle. And, like I said, this rubber stuff, it was definitely getting brittle and cracking, and part of that might have been because I reused some of the factory connectors. Part of it was just because the ones I bought were not very good. They just don't make them like they used to, right? So, anyway, to rebuild the vacuum lines on these V10s, you're going to need some parts, right? Now, I did all the research and all the work, so you don't have to, okay? I got this all figured out. This is a way more versatile and forgiving way to do your vacuum lines, in my opinion, than what they had out of the factory. So, because, out of the factory, they had everything form fitted and it was super cool, but you don't need to do that. So, you're going to need some 5/32 outer diameter line. Well, or was this 5/32 internal? No, it's 5/32 external. I'm already confusing myself. Just never mind. Anyway, 5/32 outer diameter line. I got this from McMaster Car. I got 75 feet. Each of these rolls is 25 feet, and I got them color coded so that I could. Well, I got these colored so I could color code the lines on the vehicle. Forgive my stumbling around. I do this off the top of my head, so cut me a little slack. But the point is, this stuff is not very expensive. Each one of these rolls was about $10 from McMaster Car, and you can see some part numbers here, but I'll put all the part numbers down in the description if you guys are interested. So you'll need this. You don't have to color code it if you don't want to, but I definitely get at least 25 feet if you're going to do four-wheel drive hubs and stuff, because that does take a little bit more. So you'll need all that, and then you'll need some of this 27076 silicone vacuum tubing. It is 5/32 internal diameter. You don't have to get just 6 feet. I got 12, and I used almost all 12 feet. So the reason you want this internal 5/32 and this external 5/32 is because this vacuum hose is what you're going to use to make your connectors and stuff. And then if you need to splice multiple ones of these together, of this orange hose there, I got a pack of these vacuum connectors. You don't have to. You can if you want. This was $10 at Rock Auto. Wasn't too bad, but oh my gosh, it's Power Stroke Panther. Kitty, we're not working on diesels today. We're not. Oh my goodness. Oh, he's such a good kitty cat. Is. What's wrong? Everyone loves Power Stroke Panther. He's a good kitty. Yes, he is. Oh, mark that. Yep, mark that too. You're a good kitty. All right. Anyway, vacuum connectors. I paid $10 for those because I got the rest of the stuff at Rock Auto. Rock Auto does not have this tubing. They've got rubber. Well, it's not, like rubber. It's synthetic or whatever. But the point is, it's old wiper hose. You can get wiper hose and whatever size you want, and you can use it as vacuum tubing, and that's what I did originally here. But that stuff, it's hard to connect it together, and I'll go over that in a minute. But you'll want probably some of these. It wouldn't hurt if you do get plastic hard vacuum connectors, and this is what it looks like in here. Notice there are no elbows in here, and you'll want those because on a couple spots I had to use the old rubber elbows because I needed to make some tight bends, and you can't bend that silicone tubing that tight, and you certainly can't bend this hard plastic stuff that tight either. So I would get some plastic elbows and you'll want them 5/30 seconds because you're going to be plugging them into your rubber hose here. If you don't want to buy the elbows, you could just like cut a piece off of the T and plug it, or just leave it alone and cap it or something. You might get some vacuum caps. I think I found some vacuum caps. I've got a part number. I'll put that in the description too if it's what I think it is, and you guys can get some of those if you want to cap your lines and make stuff easy. That way you don't got to buy dedicated elbows, because that does run into money, and that's the whole reason I went with this system, is because to buy the special rubber connectors that are, you know, like, I don't know, 5/30 seconds on the small end and 3/16 on the bigger end, you know, that runs into money. Those are $1.50, $2 a piece, even at Rock Auto. So if they're expensive at the cheap store, you know they're going to be extra expensive at the regular store. And I mean, this is just $30 in just the tubing, and I could rebuild this whole system like twice, except maybe not the four-wheel drive stuff, because I use the blue hose for it. But, you know, you got a lot more options with this setup than you do with just the regular old rubber and form-fitted lines that they had on at the factory. And in my opinion, this is going to last just as long, and if it doesn't, you know, it's not a big deal to replace any of this. So, yeah, you'll need hard vacuum connectors. My advice, you'll need those. You'll definitely need the silicone hose, and you'll definitely need the hard plastic line. Now, this stuff right here is not quite as durable as what came out of the factory. If I apply, you know, quite a bit of pressure with my fingers there, I can crush it. So you do have to be a little more careful, but it should be more than durable enough to handle, you know, the heat mainly is what you're wanting this to handle, and it should do that. This is listed as plastic tubing for air and water. This is nylon tubing. You can get a polyurethane, but they said it was a cheaper option if you didn't want to pay for the nylon. And I thought, well, I certainly don't want it to, you know, kink unnecessarily, and I don't want it to collapse, and I certainly don't want it to melt if it gets super hot. So I figured the nylon would be a good choice. But you'll need all this, and then this is just full of the miscellaneous leftovers. There's a thing of shrink tubing in here. If you want, and this is purely optional, I did it some, and then I figured, well, it's not really working all that well, so I quit. But if you want, as an extra measure of security, to make sure that when you plug your hard lines into your rubber hose, to make sure that all stays on there, you can get shrink tubing. This is the shrink tubing that goes from 1/4 inch, and it shrinks down to 1/8 inch. And that's more than enough to grip this, and it's enough to grip that. The problem is, and I'll show you here, because this was my experimental piece. The problem is, on this, it grips this orange stuff just fine, but on this, you see there's a little gap there. You got to be careful when you heat it on this plastic, because if you get that plastic too hot and you're not careful and you don't let it cool down, you'll just pull it apart or melt it shut, and that's even worse. So you do have to be a little bit careful when you're heating up that plastic tubing. If you need to bend it, you can. I did run a little experiment here. I did bend this. Initially, it was supposed to be more like that. It does spring back, but that's enough of a bend. If I wanted to, I could get it out to a 90, or I could tighten it up a bit, and it would still work okay. Nothing's collapsed here. So if you want to heat this stuff up and bend it, you can. Just be really careful not to apply more than a little bit of heat at a time, and then let it cool down, because you will melt it off. That's why there's no hose sticking out of that end, because I melted it off, and I tried to pull it to see if it was tight, and I just pulled the hose apart because it was still, it had melted, and it was still soft. So keep all that in mind. But this is more or less everything you need to rebuild the vacuum lines on an early build Triton V10 in either, you know, an F250, 350 Excursion. I know for a fact it's pretty much the same in the Excursions, the 250s, and the 350s. I don't know if the 4 and 550s are any different. So yeah, and I do know that I got everything hooked up right. I had that Excursion to look at, so I know everything's where it's supposed to be. So to the rubber lines right here, this is all sorts of special stuff. That's a form-fitted line that I didn't use. This is some of that wiper hose that I got. You know, you can bend it, and it will kink if you bend it too tight. That goes for anything. The problem with this stuff is it's soft, right? So if you want to connect it together, you got to use those little doodads right there, them little hard plastic fittings. Those are 3/32 connectors, because the internal diameter of this rubber wiper hose is 3/32. You know, you can't just like shove it into a bigger piece of tubing because it's soft. It's not going to do that. That's why I switched to the hard tubing. So in order to connect this rubber hose, you got to use internal connectors rather than external connectors, and those little tiny 3/32 internal connectors are not cheap. They're actually very expensive. Them little buggers are high. They're awfully proud of them, I tell you. If you would rather do this, I guess let me know and I'll give you some part numbers, because I've got part numbers for all this, but it's not going to be in the description because this is not a good system to use. You are better off to, and you're going to spend the same money, really. You're better off to get the hard plastic line and the silicone hose and do external connections to hold everything together rather than trying to do the internal connections, because that is going to not work very well. Because you'll also notice, is this the one that I crushed? No, it's not. So that is a little bit smaller internal diameter than the hose itself, because it has to taper down to have some strength there. So every one of those internal connectors you put in, it's actually a little restrictor. Now, it doesn't affect anything so much that it won't work, but I can already tell there's a major difference with using the external connectors and letting all of the internal, space be free to let all the vacuum flow through like it's supposed to, because without those little restrictors in there, it does make a little bit of a difference. The internal diameter of this hard plastic stuff, this is one of the original factory lines. The internal diameter of this stuff is 3/32 at least, but it is a lot harder. I cannot crush that with the ends of my fingers. So I don't know what that's made out of. It may be a vinyl tubing rather than a plastic tubing. But, when you don't have those little plastic restrictors in there and you've got all the internal diameter free, like I said, it works a lot better. And that's what they had done at the factory. They'd use little external connectors. They didn't try and plug anything into that. Of course, you couldn't even if you wanted to. It was all super duper hard. So I'll take you out here to the pickup, show you what I did. And either on this video or a separate video, I'll kind of go over the components and what they are and all that. But this is just kind of what I did here. This is the vacuum reservoir. But this made the, the hard bends. That's a hard bend. This is what connected all of this is one of those hard plastic tees that I showed you guys earlier in that kit. And I just used the hard plastic line and plugged it into the orange hose. And you can see this is where I started, because I tried using the shrink tubing. It does help, but it's not really worth doing on every connection. And I got everything plugged in down here. The little elbow that goes in. Let's see if I can get you in there where you can see it. All three of those lines go into, it's a special elbow, and it's a stupid piece. They could have done that a lot better. There are ways around that if the one you have is busted, but mine's not. So as you can see way back in there, I got that hooked onto my fuel pressure regulator, and then I plugged a hard plastic line into there, shoved it into that elbow. Two more lines come out, and I got all them hooked up. One of them is the supply for the vacuum reservoir, and the other one goes to that evap valve right there. The nice thing about using that orange hose is that whatever you plug it into, the little fittings on each of the components, they're probably 3/16, but a 5/32 hose will easily push onto them, and it's got good resistance if you try and pull it off. So it's not like it's going to fall off or anything anytime soon. It works really good. And you can use that for everything. You don't have to worry about trying to adapt to something bigger or smaller to hook it all up. You can make it all work with what I just described earlier. And that's why I did it the way I did. So all that's done. And then I got my lines hooked up for my four-wheel drive. I'll see if I can show you down there. Well, it's kind of hard to see what with all the lines in the way. But right there, I got a whole bunch of stuff hooked up. take you down here and show you the, you know, got that all hooked up. This is an original hose. I left it alone. I don't think there's anything wrong with it, but you can see right in there, got the supply line, and then it splits off. One line comes to the passenger side hub, and then the other line goes all the way around underneath the truck. There's a curved piece of channel iron, and it runs inside of that, and then it comes back up onto the other side like so. That's where those little rubber connectors work really well, because before they had a rubber elbow. They had the plastic line coming into a rubber elbow with the small end, and then it comes into the big end, and then there was like a hard plastic nipple, and then it, you know, this was shoved over that the other end of that hard plastic nipple. And I thought that was pretty stupid, because this was just barely on there, and that was a factory thing. That was not something somebody else did. But that should work a lot better. And, you know, it wasn't too bad to do any of this. It does look a little silly. And like I said, you don't have to color code your lines, but, you know, this is just a lot better than what I had in here before. A lot more durable, ought to last longer. And I might tie all those together just so they don't keep spreading apart, but, you know, we'll see. The only other thing I did do, this line right here runs down and back and around and under the blower motor and the evaporator core there into the cab, and that's what hooks into all the vacuum motors under your dash that run your blend doors and direct your airflow where you want, and that's pretty important to me. So now everything on this is completely rebuilt. Like I said, this video is running a little long. I'll do another video on the vacuum components and how everything works, because I've been wanting to do that for a long time now. But I thought I'd show you guys how I got the vacuum lines put together and the components I use. All of the relevant parts and part numbers will be in the description below. I might even put links directly to what I bought, and I'll have it all written down, how much I got, and stuff like that. The only other thing I think I might mention, if you're willing to spend the money, and it wouldn't hurt, if you would get a few of the variety of like the rubber connectors, the rubber elbows and stuff, you might find them useful. That's purely optional. I really didn't have much use for them. If I had hard plastic elbows, I would not have had to reuse stuff like right there. It wouldn't have been necessary. It's just I could not make the hard bends like that. The special fitting, because right down there, this right here, underneath those two elbows, that is a special fitting that came with the vehicle that I did not replace. It wouldn't be hard to replace it. It's not, these two chambers are not connected here. It's just one piece that has two different lines in it, you know what I mean? Like, vacuum does not flow on that middle piece. These are just two straight connectors that were molded together, and much the same way down here on the four-wheel drive, that battery cable's in the way. You can kind of see it better there. It's the same way on that four-wheel drive engagement solenoid. You know, it's just a couple of elbows that are molded together, but they're separate from each other. You know, vacuum doesn't flow through them all. So you can replace those if you want. And if you're going to replace this down here, because those lines stick straight out, you could just run your four-wheel drive vacuum lines down. You wouldn't have to reuse that. And, you know, as I said before, that's why I use the silicone hose and the hard plastic line, because this is the external connector and also the connector you use for the tight spaces and the weird, you know, you want to maneuver stuff around and run your lines so that they don't flop all over creation. Well, that's a good way to do it. You can do gradual bends with this stuff, but if you need to do a bunch of wonky shit, you can use that and it works just fine. The connections, like right there, that's more than solid enough. It ain't going to go nowhere. It's not going to suck air or anything like that. So the rubber vacuum connectors, the straight connectors and stuff are purely optional if you want to get them. If you want to, let me know. I got part numbers I'll share with you. The shrink tubing, there will be a part number for that in the description for the size I used, and, you know, all part numbers and stuff will be down below. give you guys plenty of options doing it this way, and should help you quite a bit. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this one short. Well, short. Gosh, it's going on for 20 minutes. I think I covered everything I wanted to. I know it's kind of all over the place, but like I said, doing it's off the top of my head, and I stumble around a bit. Want to make sure that I get everything included. So yeah. But like I said, looks goofy, but it works, and it ought to work a little bit better than what I had before. So I'm going to cut this one short. I'm going to get to filming on what the vacuum components are and what they do. You guys can hop over and check that one. It should be uploaded either right before or right after this one. So there'll be a link to it below if I do this one first. And you guys can hop over and watch that if you're curious. And if you're not, hey, that's fine too. So I hope this helped someone. If it did, let me know. If it didn't, well, I apologize that you wasted 20 minutes, but not much I can do about it now. So I'm going to get on with business, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. So take care in the meantime.